Welcome to Transform and Transformational, the Teach Beyond podcast. I'm Kian.
And I'm Heather. We're here to explore what it means to be transformed in our own lives and how that overflows to living lives of transformational impact in our communities.
Heather, as we go into our conversation today, I'm really curious to know if you have a favorite fun teacher. Maybe this is your favorite overall teacher, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the
Okay.
teacher that necessarily taught you the most or helped you achieve a breakthrough. I'm just curious purely if you have a teacher that you thought had like the best classroom environment, the most fun to be in.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably the student who found it fun when we did projects and learned creatively. So, to really answer the question of the fun teacher, the first thing I think of is my high school health teacher. People really liked that he moved around the classroom a lot. He was just very energetic. I distinctly remember a day that he truly sat on top of a filing cabinet while he taught. And so it was just like kind of that wacky, like, what is happening? And he also used video clips to teach different lessons. I think that's pretty common now, but back in the day, that was, really interesting. So, yeah, I think I can remember his energy level really like captivating people's attention. And I think that's what made him fun.
Yeah, for sure. It is funny that certain subjects where they really pull out the kind of wackier teachers. And the one that I think of is my middle school teacher. He had a really fun class, and we did lots of things that were kind of out of the ordinary, fun projects. And I think I learned a ton in that class, though. It really brought science kind of out of the books and into real life, and you get to do more experiments and try things out and do just kind of goofy projects in the classroom. So
Yeah.
he's the one I think of when I think of a fun classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. And the experiments and like creating things, doing things definitely helps to make the class fun. So I'm sure that's great. Well, today we're talking with Kevin McClintock, who it seems like is probably a lot of kids' favorite teacher. Kevin studied history, geography, and education at San Diego State and has been involved in education for over a decade, first in an after school program working with kids of all ages, and then in a formal classroom, primarily teaching grades 7 to 11. He and his wife live in San Diego, California.
Kevin is more well known as Mr. McTikTok, with 2.7 million followers on TikTok and 366,000 on Instagram, where he is known for his humorous content, which sometimes features his day in the classroom.
Of course, we're talking with Kevin about his experience going viral on social media, but we're also talking about his suggestions for teachers who are looking to build rapport with their students.
Let's go over to that conversation now.
Welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Kevin. We are so excited to have you. And are we allowed to call you Kevin? Do we call you Mr. McTikTok? I'm more curious, what do your friends and family call you?
Oh man, they will make fun of me and call me Mr. McTikTok like in a really fun, coy way. But then most of them just call me Kev.
There you
Okay.
go. Great.
Okay.
So
The real question is what your students used to call you, because I know when I was in the classroom, people, some of my students asked me if they could call me Brownie because my last name is Brown. And I drew the line there, said, no, we're going to go with Miss Brown.
yeah, that's a tough one. They call me so I was like totally fine because my last name is kind of hard for a lot of kids.
Yeah.
I had them they don't have to call me Mr. McClintock. They would just call me McClintock. Some
Mm,
would call
okay.
me Mr. Mick,
Uh-huh.
things like that.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, whatever. As long as it was like respectful enough, I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Kevin, we'll go with Kevin then. Kevin, you have the social media handle, Mr. McTikTok. That's why we're talking about this. And I'd love to just back us up and fill us in on how you decided to create a social media account as an educator. How did this first come about?
It came about because of the pandemic. I
Mm,
was teaching from, believe it or not, I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment now, but I was like even in a smaller little single studio teaching from my laptop when we went into lockdown. And
mhm,
I could see like the lifelessness in my
mm,
students. I was teaching at that point, I was teaching 7th and 8th grade and 10th grade at that time. And so it was kind of like I just saw it and I was like, man, I got to get into their world a little bit. And the kids were talking about TikTok and it was kind of like the big buzz at the time. And I was like, man, okay, I'll check it out. And honestly, I started going through it and it was kind of like Vine to me. And Vine was like I loved Vine. I could like watch compilations of Vine all day. And I just decided, I might as well start making content because I've always like made content in some way. Just never really posted it or anything like that. And yeah, I came up with this like really fun name, Mr. McTikTok, off of my name, and started making fun of myself, and trying to represent teachers, and doing like the silly stuff to connect with the kids. And I had a couple videos go really viral, and the kids were just like locked in at that point. They were like, "We're gonna,"
Mm.
when I made my account, they were all about it. And it was kind of cool because then at the end of the day, or at the end of class, we got to talk about it. So I gave them like the last 15 minutes of class to
Uh-huh.
just spitball ideas, and just talk about TikTok, and like, what was, what they were watching, and, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Did
it
you
was
end
really
up
cool.
getting ideas from them about what your TikToks were going to be?
Rarely, rarely.
A
So
great honest answer.
I I think a lot of my inspiration for like my teacher TikToks was always like just like little narratives that I had in my head of like
Mhm,
things that I
mhm.
thought were like super funny. Um, and sure, I would get inspired by my students, especially if I was like trying to mimic them. I would see a kid doing something, and then I would make it as hyperbolic as possible, but like still mostly true. You know what I mean? And so yes, there's inspiration from, you know, teaching, but a lot of it were just like jokes I would like write down and things throughout my day. So
It sounds like your kids were very aware of your social media presence. Was that the plan from the get-go, or were you trying to, like, keep it separate from your classroom?
no, it was a plan from the get go. I was like, Mr. McTikTok, baby, let's go. So and it just evolved over time. As I started getting more followers and more engagement. It was really cool, and I got to do like positive stuff, and also negative stuff towards me. Like I will make fun of myself. Like that is
Mm,
like one of the things, and
mhm.
I like making fun of like not serious. Like I like making fun of millennials myself. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah,
things like that, or like my wife and I'll make fun of us and things like that. So,
yeah, yeah.
but a lot of the times I like to keep it so it's not like as evident, but I hope it is. Um, like my faith. So I've posted
Mhm,
a few videos about it. So it's like I keep my content clean and
mhm.
silly, just because like that's what I want. I want kids to be able to watch my content, moms to be able to watch my content. Like I've literally had moms say like, "Hey, I showed my kid your video," and I was like,
Yeah,
"That's so cool!" Like
yeah.
that to me is like that's the epitome of social media for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It seems like there's a line between having fun, making fun of yourself, and making fun that can, get borderline into making fun of others, or that can even go downhill, even if it's clean content. It's like,
100%.
kind of degrading on others. So, how do you decide when you're thinking about like classroom related content? What is fair game?
So I have had to, I mean, I've made mistakes. Like I'm not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
I'll get into it, and it's just the excitement of it and everything. And if I have to take a video down, I'll take it down. No questions asked. If someone's like, "Hey, I don't really like that video." I'm like, "Not a problem. That's down,
Mm-hmm.
out, gone." I also kind of filter through my wife a little bit too
Mm,
sometimes, because she has the gift of discernment. And even if I think something is like super clean and funny, I might not think of, just a different perspective. And she is a former therapist. And so
mm,
she kind of has like that background to see something that I might not see.
mhm,
So I
mhm.
filter through her as well. Um, and yeah, I think that would be kind of that like towing the line. But
Yeah.
I do that, and I did that in my class as well. I towed the line of like, I love you, but I'm going to roast you. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you have that rapport, you can build on that without concern. What has
yeah.
been one of your favorite moments with, your social media platforms?
Oh, so I would say like even my favorite videos are like kind of. I mean, I had a following then, but it was a lot smaller, and it was right as we went back into teaching, and we were kind of in like half lockdown, I guess. Like
Mhm.
we still had to wear masks. Our classes were a lot smaller, and our kids had to be like 6 feet apart. It was just like the weirdest time.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there were no sports going on, no clubs, like there was nothing. But I was able to like make a deal with my principal, basically, where I could have kids come hang out after school, and I would like chaperone them, and we'd make TikToks together. And it was like these crazy stories, just ridiculous, like entertainment, running through the hallways. Like it's so fun. And I mean, I'm talking high school students acting like they're in elementary, like in a
Mhm.
fun way, not like in an annoying way. You know what I mean? And it was that for me was probably it was like my TikTok crew. And I still talk
Mm,
to a couple of my boys who graduated years ago. And I'll go to the gym, like I'll meet up with them and go to the gym and just check in on them. And
hmm,
they tell me their their dating life. They tell me if, how they're doing going to church and whether they
mm,
are or they aren't. Things
mhm,
like that. And just, I mean, this is fun. I really appreciated this, but I had one of my former students. I mean, he's like 22 now, but he like called me and told me that he was seeing a girl. You know what I
mhm.
mean? And he was like excited that he was going to go on this like first date and stuff. And like that was really really like for me, that's like where my heart is. You know what I mean? I'm
Mm,
like,
mhm.
get to like just encourage him and all of that. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
yeah, I think that was for me the best time of TikTok and the
that's
best
neat.
time of doing social media and all that.
Yeah, the relationships behind it, not just the public face, but actually what that built with rapport with people in your actual life. That's really neat.
Yeah, and it was like all an accident. I was just making stuff after school. Like I was making the videos after school, and a couple of kids walked by and they're like, "We've got nothing better to do. Can we be in your videos?" And I was like, "Sure, let's get consent form signed.
Yeah.
Let's talk to the school. Let's like, do all that." And then I would be totally fine with that. And so
Yeah, yeah.
and then it just became a thing.
I love it. I love hearing the importance of the relationship, the dynamic you have with your students. And as we're thinking about this, these kids that you're being silly with, making funny videos, how does that then translate into the classroom? So, being a silly teacher, having kids make jokes, it sounds as though you kind of make jokes towards them. They probably make jokes towards you, I'm guessing. um, how does that work then still when you need to tell them to, like, hey, we got to actually get work done. So, like, you got to sit down and stop talking. Um, how do you navigate those kind of dual dynamics?
So I would say it's kind of routine. So when you have more professional routines, like when the kids come into class and they know what's expected of them. Inside the class, we can get stuff done, and we still can be funny, but we have certain goals, and we hit our goals in class. After that, there can be a little bit more silliness, but I am silly. I've always been silly. There's videos of me that before before the social media days of me dancing in the middle of class doing ridiculous stuff, and one of the kids like videoed it and then like airdropped it to me. So I have that, and that's like one I go back to and watch all the time because I'm like, to see those kids like as little too, and now to see them like as almost grown adults, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you know but I would say there is like when you are kind of an entertainer, there's always going to be this like ebb and flow. Sometimes you have to be more direct. Sometimes you have to be more direct with the kids and say, "Hey, let's do this first, and then we can be silly again." If we're doing a review game, we used to do history hoops when I was a history teacher, and it was a game, and it's like trash get ball basically, and I made up these different rules and made it super fun. Those times, absolutely, it's silly. We're roasting each other. We're saying like, "Oh, you sold!" Like, don't sell, don't sell. Like goofing off like that. Great. Test time. It's like, okay, guys, like no talking. If you need anything, raise your hand. Like developing those habits. Um, I don't know. I think it's really hard for me to describe it because it just comes so natural for me to like switch like that. Because when I first started teaching, I would teach kindergartners, and then because I worked at a private school, and then I would teach high schoolers by the end of the day. So
Wow.
I'd have to go from being a complete goofball and an entertainer, and being like, okay, look over here, now look over here, and then going, and then to like sitting down, having like a legitimate conversation about college with you know seniors.
Mhm.
And it was like literally within 30 minutes I would
Mhm.
just switch it, and
Mhm.
so I got a lot of practice doing that, and I think that was really beneficial,
Mhm.
because it was like I could be really really silly and goofy and then switch it on a dime.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm. And not in a got you kind of way, but
no.
in a, okay, we can have fun and we can also be productive, and those can sometimes bleed into each other, but sometimes there is that distinction of, okay, right
Yes.
now we're focusing and I'm going to lead the way in that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Totally. Like Fridays, a little bit more like have some fun. Those are the days where I would dance or jump up on the desks and, do crazy stuff. But if it was like a Monday, it was like, okay, we got to get our stuff together, guys.
Mhm.
That's funny.
Is there it sounds like you've taught a lot of different grade levels and experiences.
Mm.
So is there kind of a grade level where you say like, okay, these kids can handle that switch and some of these kids can't? Like maybe high schoolers can and maybe middle schoolers can't. Uh, I'm just kind of curious how you navigate. Maybe this one kid in my classroom can't handle that switch and other kids
Yeah.
Mm.
can.
Yeah, totally. So I think middle school is that sweet spot where I get to be like really silly. So I would say like seventh and eighth graders, I can be really silly and goofy and kind of have a lot of the energy going, and
Mhm.
they can handle the back and forth.
Mhm.
High school, I don't necessarily. When I was teaching high school, I could be a little silly with them, but it was like not as goofy, not as like childishly goofy like I would be with the middle schoolers. With high school, we could, make jokes and things like that, but it was, at a higher level, and then I taught AP US history as well. And that was like on another level of maturity,
Yeah.
and so having to teach that, it was like just a very different vibe going from
Mhm.
AP, like a push, to middle school, like eighth grade history, eighth grade US history. I'm teaching the same subject, but it's like vastly different. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, yeah, it, I would say the sweet spot and the really fun spot is middle school.
Do you have? I've talked to one of my friends who's a teacher, and he was kind of saying, "Hey, you start the year serious, and then you can be goofy later on." Or do you have any response to that? Is that kind of the way you navigate it, or are you the same from day one till the
I
end of the
would,
year?
so I'm day one. I am who I am. I'm going to be
Okay.
silly, but I would say the boundaries are set and you hold that line from the beginning. And I don't think there's ever, I know a lot of teachers say this. I know a lot of veteran teachers say, like, be really strict, like the first like 3 weeks. And then after that, you can just coast. And I'm like, that's not true. I don't believe that. I will push back on that. I say you set the boundaries and you keep them. And I know it gets hard you can look at like a graph. There's like I forget what it is, but you can look at a graph of like teaching where it's like the beginning of the school year, it's awesome. The kids are awesome. You're like establishing all these routines and boundaries. And then, you get towards Halloween and things start to get a lot harder and a lot harder. And then it's like Thanksgiving. And then it's like you have that little break and you're like, thank God you've built in breaks. And then you getting close to like Christmas and everybody's starting to get a little bit more hyped and it's a little bit better. And then they come back from winter break and it's kind of like reestablishing everything. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
springtime is the worst time, and everybody feels it. But I would say like you have to fight to keep those boundaries. And I don't want to change. Like I'm not gonna like, I don't know. I don't want to like catfish my students in that way where
Mhm.
it's like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be this really hard guy, like, day one, like wear a suit and a tie and all that stuff. I'm like, they know me already. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like,
You have
and
a reputation that
I have a
precedes you.
reputation. I have a reputation. Actually, yeah, they're really surprised that like we don't make videos in class. Like none of my videos have ever been done during work hours, during school hours. And they're like, "What? You're like a real teacher?" And I'm like, "Yeah, duh." So,
Uh,
yeah, I just say like you set the boundaries, you hold them, and you can be yourself in that. And I think as long as
Mhm.
you have those boundaries, and then I would just say it's just like kids, right? If they know that there's boundaries, they feel safe. And that's
Mhm.
when you get to be silly, and that's when you get to be goofy, and it's not a detriment to class.
Mhm. Mhm. Can you talk to us a little bit more about setting those boundaries? Like, how do you know where to set those, and how do you communicate those?
Well, I would say it takes experience. I don't expect because my first year of teaching, it was like, yeah,
You gotta learn through it, right?
yeah, I had to learn. I did a lot of tears in the principal's office. So, um, my tears,
Yes,
not the
right, to be
students.
clear.
Just to be clear, I would go to the principal, and she's amazing. She's like, you're the son I always, I always
Yeah,
wanted and never
yeah.
had, or and it was my first year of teaching, and um, I was just in there like every Friday going like, what do I do? These kids are crazy. Like, I don't even know if we're gonna hit our target this year, and like like all this stuff. And she's like basically like talking me off the edge like every week, and then it just became a lot easier, it just through experience. And I would say how I know, I don't know, the kids, right? I think looking at the kids, looking at their personalities, seeing how they flow, right? What I would do is I would give kids, like, I set my tables up to be like a quadrant, right? Like I had like four kids at a table or sometimes more. And I would put their name, I'd like assign their name to the table, but then they got to choose where they wanted to sit at the
Mhm.
table. So that like little forced choice kind of thing, give them a little bit of freedom, but then also like you're in middle school, you don't get to choose exactly where you get to sit. You know what I mean? And also like looking at, I think preparation and knowing who your students are before you meet them. I know not every teacher gets that luxury, but if it's in the system and you get to see like behavioral stuff and you get to see, different things, any uh, special needs and anything like that, it really helps you kind of set that boundary
Mm,
and
mm,
set the tone of the class as well,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Um, for me, we had like just certain rules that we'd put up and we just held those rules. I think
mhm,
they changed every
mhm,
year depending on the needs of my students, but that's what we did. We kind of created a class culture that
mhm,
was
mhm.
based off of the rules that we all decided on.
Let's take a short break for a story from the field.
Hello, my name is Mike Greenhoe, and I serve at Black Forest Academy. One thing that I like to do to get to know my students, and I do this activity at the beginning of every year, and I also do it after every break when everybody comes back, is I play the yes-no game. And the yes-no game is so simple. It is, if you answer yes to the question, you stand up. And I used to ask every student a bunch of different questions, and they used to just get bored because they're having to listen to every different class member say the exact same thing. Whereas the yes no game, you ask the question once and you have most of your class stand up, yes or no, and then sometimes you can individually ask each student a little bit more about that. So some of the questions I like to ask, especially at the beginning of the year, is do you have any siblings? Are you the older brother? Are you the older sister? Are you the youngest in your family? Um, are you living in the dorms or are you living with your parents? What countries have you gone to over break? And that's great because we're an international school. I always love to ask what they're reading. So did you read a book over break? Or did you watch a movie in a movie theater with who? Or did you do a winter sport if they're coming back from Christmas break? I asked if they went swimming over spring break. Did you go to a beach over summer? So I usually ask about 5 to 10 questions, especially at the beginning of the year, and it takes about 20 minutes, but at least the whole class can see how each person is answering, and they're kind of active because they're moving up and down all the time. And then you can actually ask a little bit more as you go around the room. So I really enjoy this game, and it's just a little easy activity, but you can get a lot of information fast, and the students can actually see you engaging with every student of the classroom. So that is one of my favorite things to do in my class to get to know my students.
For our weekly spotlight, we are focusing on social studies teachers.
And you know what, Kian? I'm actually looking at Teach Beyond's opportunity board right now, and we have 31 opportunities currently, as of this exact moment, to teach social studies all around the globe. So just for social studies teachers in Latin America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, 31 different opportunities.
That is great. So come check them out, even see if their number may have decreased from 31 down to 30 at this point. If you want to learn more, visit teachbeyond.org/go or click on the link in the show notes.
What suggestions do you have for teachers who are wanting to build rapport with their students? I think humor can fall under, and some of the other things we've been talking about can fall under building rapport. But what else would you suggest for this?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So, there are students that are going to be like, dude, this guy's just a clown. You know what I mean? I
Mm,
mean, they know like, oh, he loves us. Absolutely. But he's a goofball. You know what I mean? And it's just inevitable. You can't have, not everybody's going to love you. You know what I
mhm,
mean? One of those kids that just wants to just get in, get out kind of thing
mhm,
is not going to be all about me jumping up on desks. Like, sure, they'll be like, okay, whatever, like they'll entertain it. But, if they're also just like really, really like intellectually driven in that way too, they're going to see it as like, okay, it's like smoke and mirrors. He's like just trying to
mhm,
entertain the kids, like especially those kids over there. He's trying to
uh-huh,
entertain. So my advice is to not like just throw in humor into, and all that, but it's to get to know the kids. You have to observe them. You have to know their interests. And that's like that whole thing for me was the getting on social media. Like every one of those kids was on social media and playing video games at the time. So it was like I was like, okay, I'm gonna dive into this world because this is like you have to have that commonality to connect with them. You can talk about I can talk about like George Washington all day to these kids, and they're just gonna be like, but we bring a Fortnite, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, and they light up, and then they can talk about this and that and this, and then over time there's that building of trust, right? When you go and you just ask them questions, and sure, you're going to have kids that are going to be, they're not going to trust you, they're not going to trust adults, right? They're going to see you as like just another like narc or whatever. You're like, you're just like another extension of my parents or whatever. And but if you are consistent and you continue, I think consistency is the key.
mm, yes.
Consistently
Yeah.
pouring into those kids, you will break down their barriers. It's
Mm,
inevitable
mhm,
because you're going to be with them as much as their parents are, if not more,
mm,
depending on the school situation and the
mhm,
home life.
mhm,
So I think
yeah.
that to me, that consistency and, you know, just showing interest in your students is way more important than just being goofy and doing all the crazy stuff that I would do.
Mhm.
You know,
And being yourself too in that,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
whoever you are and whoever they are.
right, yes,
Yeah.
within reason, right,
Right,
in a
right.
professional setting.
Yes.
I think because I can be a clown that like acts like a kid, like a true
Yeah.
kid with my friends, but I still am the authority in the room. So
Yeah.
there still has to be an idea that if something happens, I am the authority in the room,
Right,
with those
right.
kids. So they have to trust that as well.
And there's a safety in that, a security in that to know they can
Yes.
trust you even as you're having fun. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
and having that, like, I mean, they don't they do they did a study where they just like put kids out on a playground and there were no fences and the kids were just like, we don't know what to do, and they all like stayed together and they wouldn't go anywhere because they didn't feel safe. Then you put the fences up and the kids were out playing and they were doing everything and they were like going up to the fences and you know, and it was like
Yeah.
that translates to a
Yeah.
classroom,
Yeah.
you know.
It's a great visual. We have in common working with middle schoolers. I also loved my years teaching middle school, so I'm with you in that. It's been a decade since then, but I learned so much from my students during that time, and I'd love to hear what you've learned from your students and maybe from your followers, maybe from parents, others in this bigger, wider community too.
Yeah, I would say some of like the most like um stark things, like most I think the things that like pop up in my brain like right away would be cultural differences. Growing up in my mom was a single mom. We had there was food scarcity in my family. Um, but if you look at me, you may not see that at all, you know. And I had students that were totally have that, and then I have students that live in a mansion in a really nice area, you know. And having those differences in cultures really kind of dictates in some ways how a kid is going to learn and how a kid is going to relate to you and how they're going to relate to each other. And that was really important for me to be able to kind of balance all of that, um, and to be able to pour into the kid that is a rich kid, you know, that may, and then maybe a kid that doesn't have as much as another kid does. And um, yeah, I think again that goes back to like understanding your kids, you know, having interest in them and talking about them, like, oh, you know, how's your dad? And they're like, well, my dad, you know, does, I mean, I wouldn't just ask like how's your dad, you could ask like, you know, what's your family like and things like that. And some kids are like, well, I'm adopted, you know, or whatever, or like foster care, and it's just like knowing, just knowing your kids in that way. I mean, that was the advice that was given to me, I think, you know. And I learned from my kids because they'll be honest with you. Your kids are brutally honest with you. You know, if you're like losing trust with them or losing momentum with them, they'll tell you. And I think that's really important, is that like you can trust the kids more than you think. You know, sure, they're gonna lie to you, they're gonna like exaggerate, but if it's like something that's real to them, they're gonna be really honest.
Well, I'm hearing that it really matters that you get to know the students in front of you. You know, we don't just teach a subject, we teach students.
Oh
And
yeah,
so that is kind of the foundation of a lot of what you're sharing. And that's so helpful.
yeah, absolutely. I I'll tell you, the thing that miss about teaching is not teaching the subject of history, or I mean, I taught a lot of things, like health, and all, and everything that is entailed with health to ninth graders.
Yeah.
I've taught a lot of things. Not once do I miss the content.
Mm,
The one thing that I miss is the relationship with the kids, you know,
yeah.
building that relationship. And I still have it. Like I can go back to the school and they're
Hmm.
there and they're like, ah, McClintock. Or they'll, you know, like, they'll be like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm subbing, or like I'm working on fundraising for the school. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. You know, and they'll like come up and give me like that, you know, like a fist bump or like that, like man hug kind of thing or whatever it is. And I'm like, good to see you too, buddy. And they'll be like, "Oh, I got some tea for you," and it's like starts all over again. Yeah, so I would say, yeah, you can't teach a subject to somebody that's not willing, you know. And when you know them, that's when they're gonna want to learn. You know, I've had some students say, "Oh," you know, I've had some like students of mine just say, "I hate history, but I love your class," you know. And I'm not going to try to get them to love history, but they know that I love them, so they're going to
Mhm.
at least do the bare minimum, do the bare minimum well.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. As you mentioned, kind of getting to know your kids and being able to talk to them and connect with them. I have an important question as a millennial. Can you give us some slang terms that we should all use or misuse to try and connect with Gen Z?
it's not even Gen Z anymore, guys. So it's Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and I just had a baby niece born,
Yeah.
And like this last weekend, and she's Gen Beta.
Oh,
I'm like, what is
wow.
happening? I'm like, what
Yeah.
is happening?
I'm so old.
I'm getting
Yeah, this
old.
is a really important question to land on at the
So
end,
yeah,
so
so
I'm
what are
glad
some
we're
of the
covering this.
the Gen Alpha terms we'll need to know?
The Gen Alpha terms are basically like memes and stuff they like get from YouTube and YouTube
Okay.
Shorts, like cooked. You know, they'll say like cooked is if you got like beat in. So we would say like if somebody dunked on you or like hit their three-point shot like in basketball, like, oh, you just got cooked or whatever, and then all of a sudden like the little kids were saying it, and I'm like, what? And it's from video games, sports, all that.
Uh-huh.
Riz means that
Yeah.
you have, comes from charisma, right? That you have game, you can talk to the ladies or the guys or whatever, and you can pull. I'm trying to
I'm
think.
glad that you referenced the root word of riz is charisma from
Yeah,
the Latin word
from the
charisma.
from the Latin root of charisma. Yeah, I
Great.
don't know, and it's crazy because the slang is changing so fast now. It's insane.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for enlightening us with all of, all of this new knowledge. This was so helpful, so interesting, and just fun to talk about education and humor and how those all kind of go together in connecting with your students. We have one last question we ask all of our guests, and that's what's one thing that's changing your life right now. So this can be something big, something serious, or something small and light, wherever you want to go with it. I'll go first, and then you'll have a little time to think about what your answer will be. So what's changing my life is I wear clothes until they get holes in them. And at this point, I've had a number of shirts that just kind of there's big holes in the
You're
sleeves,
done.
and I'm all working remote, so it doesn't even matter. But now that I'm gonna start seeing people more, I've had to start replacing those like clothes that are like 10 years old, 12 years old, because it actually people can see the holes in your elbows when you're in real life versus
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Microsoft Teams. So
Yeah, you got to
that's
wear
been changing
pants
my life.
again, full pants again. Can't just wear shorts anymore.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard out there.
I'm so glad you came clean on that, Kian. Well, for me, what's changing my life lately is that my cousin's daughter is so my first cousin once removed is now old enough to have a messaging app. It's still not like iMessage or one of the main ones, but it's connected to her mom's Fitbit. And so there, it's still got some parent protection to it,
Yeah.
but she can just directly message me through that. And it's been super fun. I mean, she told me about her loose tooth a few weeks ago and what she wants for her birthday. And it's been really fun. My nephews and niece are not old enough to text themselves yet. So it's super fun to have a cousin's kid who is old enough. And I'll claim that. I'm so happy to be on the short list of contacts for for her to send out. So that's been fun. Kevin, what's been changing your life lately?
Oh man. So 2025 has been insane. Like, I mean, I thought 2024 was insane because I left teaching and we had plans to move closer to Katie's family and have a family, and everything kind of fell apart. And
Mm,
we've been kind of just in a transition period. But then 2025 hit, and we're like, whoa, Katie got surgery. I got surgery. Um, we have a niece, and it's all happened within like the span of like 4 or 5
yeah,
weeks.
it's
And
not
then
been that long of 2025
I,
so far.
I,
So
I know it's like, oh, what's going to happen? And also something that came up, and it's been something that I've needed to address for a long time. But I was diagnosed with ADHD combined at 33 years old, guys. So I didn't, I mean, everybody knew except for me, you know. But it became something that like kind of changed my life when I left teaching, because I had always been. I mean, like from the time that you are a student in school, you go all the way up, then you become a teacher. You're like constantly in school, you
mm,
know. And so I had this organized life. I was like in my box, in my safe
mhm.
box, and I was able to thrive in it. I was able, and I think it gave me because I'm I'm inattentive, hyperactive, and impulsive. That's what the combined is. So I'm a lot like some of my students, and I think it allowed me to build relationships because like the kids kind of saw a little bit of themselves in me. But removing myself from that organized space, that scheduled space, has been the hardest thing that I have gone through. And it's been relationally within my marriage. Um, it's been harder. It's been harder just to like own my own business and to set the terms of how I'm doing it. And so, yeah, that has been a lot. And it's been pretty freeing and hopeful that I've gotten diagnosed. So I'm able to have resources to help, you know, which has been awesome. But it's wild.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
it is life changing for me.
Well, I think, having more clarity is encouraging and also hard at the same time, right? You can realize things that, oh, now I understand, but also now I have to figure out what I'm going to do with this and what this means and, navigate that. So that makes a
100%.
lot of sense. It changes your life in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast about ADHD, and it was, the things that are misunderstood about it,
Mhm.
because I tried to tell my mom. I was like, "Hey mom, like I'm going to go get tested for this. I'm going to go see a psychiatrist and we're going to do this." And she's like, "No, you don't have it. Like you got good grades in school and all this stuff." And I was, yeah, I did. I'm smart. I was able to kind of deal with it, but at the same time, I talked to my old teachers, and they're like, "You were a handful in class. I had to sit, like, I legitimately had my own desk, like, away from everybody." And I remembered that as like me just being funny, but
Uh-huh.
it was the impulse
Uh-huh.
control. I couldn't stop talking, and as you guys can probably deduce right now, I do the same thing. I talk a lot. Um, but hearing all the little things that are common of ADHD, especially in adults that might have gone undiagnosed, I was like getting emotional because I was like, whoa, that's me. Like that's my struggle. Like I'm not broken, you know? And it's like my brain just works differently. And it's crazy that I can see that now, you know? And it's awesome that um if I go back to teaching or if I go back to mentorship, that I know that inevitably there's going to be a kid that feels like me, and I will be able to pour into them. And so I think it's like a beautiful thing, even though it is a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, thanks again so much for joining us, Kevin, for sharing a bit of your story, even right there. And yeah, for your encouragement for teachers who are trying to figure out what it looks like to connect with their students and to be the best teachers they can be. So we appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I loved it.
That was such an interesting conversation. The ability to engage with students on a level that might feel like just being silly, but is actually building a lot of trust and relationships within the classroom. And it's also great that you can tell that this is something that comes naturally to Mr. McTikTok, and it might be more of a stretch for others teachers. But if you are a goofy teacher, you have permission to embrace it, to be goofy.
True.
But it also seems like the important takeaway is that every teacher has a different style. So what matters is getting to know your students and showing that you actually care about them.
Yeah, you could hear the heart behind the humor wasn't just to have fun, but also
Mhm.
for students to know that personal touch, the intentional care, and so that that was great. Well, Kian and I serve with an organization called Teach Beyond. As you have heard, education plays a big role in missions, and Teach Beyond is a part of that.
As followers of Jesus, Teachment is a global community providing transformational education services as part of God's ongoing mission to transform individuals and communities into all He intends.
Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org or follow us on social media.
To help more people find the podcast and hear about Teach Beyond, we'd love it if you would leave a rating or review and share the show with a friend. Be sure you're subscribed or following the show on the platform where you listen so you never miss an episode.
And as always, you can reach us at podcast@teachbeyond.org. We'll see you next week.